L'État, c'est moi. I am the state. This one phrase, whether he truly said it or not, perfectly captures the life and reign of the man who would define an entire era. A king who ruled for so long that he outlived his own son and grandson. A monarch who built a palace not just of gold and marble, but of pure, unshakable power. This is the story of Louis XIV, the Sun King, and how he forged modern France in his own glittering, autocratic image. To understand the absolute monarch, we must first meet the frightened child. Born in 1638, Louis ascended to the throne at the tender age of 4. Of course, he did not rule. France was in the hands of his mother, Anne of Austria, and her cunning chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin. This was not a peaceful time. The French nobility, resentful of the crown's growing power, erupted in a series of civil wars known as the Fronde. For the young king, this was a period of chaos and humiliation. At one point, a Parisian mob broke into the royal palace, demanding to see him. They stormed into his bedchamber, and he was forced to pretend to be asleep as commoners stared down at him, a chilling lesson in the weakness of a crown without control. He and his mother were even forced to flee Paris in the middle of the night. These memories of disorder, of nobles betraying the crown, of the monarchy itself being threatened, were seared into his mind. He learned a vital lesson. To secure his kingdom, he must secure himself. He must be absolute. He must be the sun, and all of France must revolve around him. In 1661, Cardinal Mazarin died. The court officials approached the now 22-year-old king and asked to whom they should now report. His response shattered centuries of tradition. Louis declared simply that he would be his own chief minister. From that day forward, all lines of power, every decision of the state, would lead directly to him. This was the true beginning of his reign. He was intelligent, disciplined, and possessed an astonishing capacity for work. He pored over state documents, led his own councils, and began to centralize the fractured French government. He chose his ministers not from the ancient, powerful nobility, but from men of humbler origins. Men who owed their position, their power, and their loyalty entirely to him. His most brilliant choice was his finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert. Together, they worked to streamline the chaotic tax system and implement a new economic policy: mercantilism. The goal was simple: make France rich by exporting more than it imported. They funded new industries, built up the navy, and sought to make France the economic powerhouse of Europe. All this wealth would serve a singular purpose: to project the glory of the king. And how did Louis project that glory? He built a universe in brick and gold. He took his father's modest hunting lodge, a few miles outside of Paris, and transformed it into the most magnificent palace Europe had ever seen: Versailles. Versailles was not merely a home. It was a statement, a weapon, a meticulously designed theater of power. Its sprawling gardens, its glittering hall of mirrors, its sheer, overwhelming scale were all designed to awe visitors and display the infinite power of its creator. But its true genius lay in its function. Louis moved his entire court and government to Versailles. He required the great nobles of France, the very men whose families had rebelled during the Fronde, to leave their own regional power bases and live under his roof. Here, their lives were governed by an impossibly complex system of etiquette and ritual. Their status was no longer determined by their lands or armies, but by their proximity to the king. Who got to hold a candle while the king dressed? Who was allowed to sit on a certain type of stool in his presence? These were the new currencies of power. The nobles, trapped in this gilded cage, spent their time and fortunes competing for trivial royal favors instead of plotting against the crown. Louis had effectively domesticated them. The most famous ritual was the lever du roi, the king's rising. A select few were granted the immense privilege of watching the king wake, wash, and dress. It was a daily reinforcement of the central idea of his reign. Louis was not just a man. He was the living embodiment of France, and his every action was a matter of state. But the sun that nourishes can also burn. Louis's quest for glory, was insatiable, and it came at a staggering cost. His reign was defined by near-constant warfare. He sought to expand France's borders to what he called its natural frontiers, leading to decades of conflict with the Dutch, the Spanish, and the Holy Roman Empire. These wars, especially the long and ruinous War of the Spanish Succession, drained the French treasury that Colbert had so carefully built. Famine and poverty ravaged the countryside, while the court at Versailles remained a bubble of impossible luxury. Perhaps the darkest stain on his reign came in 1685. A devout Catholic, Louis believed that religious unity was essential for national unity. He revoked the Edict of Nantes, a decree that had granted religious freedom to France's Protestant minority, the Huguenots. The result was a catastrophe. Protestant churches were destroyed, and their followers were brutally persecuted. Over 200,000 Huguenots, many of them skilled artisans, merchants, and intellectuals, fled France. They took their knowledge, their skills, and their wealth with them, enriching France's rivals like England, Prussia, and the Netherlands. It was a self-inflicted wound from which France would take decades to recover. Louis XIV reigned for 72 years and 110 days, the longest of any sovereign monarch in European history. In his later years, he was a figure of tragedy. He outlived his son, his eldest grandson, and his eldest great-grandson. The dazzling court of his youth grew quiet, overshadowed by military defeat and personal loss. As he lay on his deathbed in 1715, he looked upon his 5-year-old great-grandson, the future Louis XV, and offered a final, regretful piece of advice. Do not imitate me in my taste for building, nor in my love for war. Try to relieve the suffering of your people. His reported last words were, I am going, but the state will always remain. He was wrong. He had so completely fused his own identity with that of the nation that his departure left a vacuum that his successors could never truly fill. He left behind a France that was the cultural center of Europe, but also a nation burdened by debt and social tension. The absolute monarchy he had perfected would, less than a century after his death, be consumed by the fires of revolution. Louis XIV's legacy is one of breathtaking paradox, a legacy of gold and iron, of breathtaking art and brutal warfare. He was the ultimate architect of absolute power, a king who truly became the sun around which his nation revolved. And like the sun, his brilliance cast a very, very long shadow. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of the Sun King, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories from history. What other powerful monarchs' reigns should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.